satin beneath the alibi. On the line, the air is a muscle you push against. Stainless sings when knives kiss it, and the exhaust hood drags every confession upward, where it clings to the filters like a second skin. I like the beginning of service when the burners are obedient and the oils are still pretending to be calm, when my cooks stand in the bright grid of their stations like chess pieces that know their squares. I run my palm over the cutting board, feel the grain, tap the heel of my main knife on its spine. It gives me that alive little bell that says, "You and I are going to do this again without killing each other." I'm Luca. If I'm doing it right, the plates look inevitable and the chaos stays private. Etta, my restaurant, is all timber and soft black with a window onto a narrow street that collects secrets the way cupped hands collect water. We do 8 courses, which is ridiculous and exactly enough. People set their phones down for us and remember how to be warm. Elena walked into my life wearing the kind of white blouse that knows it's the main event. PR, event architect, jawline like a verdict. She tasted of mint and strategy. The first time she sat at the pass, she didn't flinch when a pan hissed like a cat. She watched me plate a scallop with 2 rings of milk and smoke and said, "You make people think you're feeding their nostalgia. Really, you're giving them a future they can swallow." "I could feed you that future," I said, because it was late and I'd been pushed to the edge of good judgment by heat. "You could try," she replied, and then she kissed me behind the walk-in with her hands at my waist, thumbs inside my chef pants like a clause closing over a risky sentence. We started with urgency and stayed there longer than most couples get to. Our hours were nocturnal and our morals stylish. She told me early on my couch with her bare feet in my lap, "We're in a world that eats itself if you let it. We can either be boring and break or be grown and write rules." She took a pen from behind her ear and began to tick things off on an order pad. "No one from the staff. No one in our bed. We say it before, not after. No humiliations. We keep work clean." "Promises on paper," I said. "We'll make an art of it," she said, and she folded the pad into my shirt pocket like a veil tucked into a jacket. Desire in a kitchen is ambient. It rises with the steam, caramelizes with the onions, sits down at the staff meal with bare forearms and exposed throats. But the first wrong note with Elena wasn't jealousy. It was perfume. The woman never wore sweet. She liked her colognes like her pitches, brisk, persuasive, gone before you could argue. One Tuesday morning my jacket came home smelling faintly of fig and lacquered benzoin, something that entered a room 5 seconds before its owner. Elena shrugged. "A journalist hugged me too hard," she said, laughing, as if that explained why there were 2 champagne flutes on the minibar receipt tucked under her laptop. You shouldn't date someone who knows how to interpret a receipt the way a priest interprets a confession. And you shouldn't be someone who reads the world as if it's a tasting menu with hidden allergens. I told myself coincidence is a spice and overused. I stacked plates until the mountain steadied me. I went out to the dining room and charmed someone important with a story about the sea. Elena arrived like a small storm disguised as a person. Food photographer, hands nicked by a different kind of blade, voice low with late nights, hair pinned up like a practical refusal. Her portfolio had that quiet honesty I trust, the light landing where taste lives, not where advertising tells it to. She came to shoot for a magazine feature and stayed because we both cared more about what happened between the bite and the swallow than what happened on the page. "Don't lie to me with garnish," she said, the first time I slid a plate under her lens. "If it doesn't tell the story, I'll make it look like what it is, panic with microgreens." "I don't do panic," I said. "You do it beautifully then," she said, and smiled without showing me her teeth. She watched me reduce a jus until it was the color of midnight. She leaned over a slab of tuna with a small brush, slicking its skin like a ceremony, and I felt that stupid rush, recognition masquerading as appetite. She smelled like orange rind under a clean darkness, like the bartender's secret ingredient I never see. When she told me she kept her own salt in her pocket, I asked her to show me. She tapped a little onto my tongue with her index finger. I let my mouth take that shred of skin and salt into memory. I told Elena about Elena because I had signed a treaty with clear clauses. We were sitting on my prep table after service with the exhaust hood still purring like a content animal. Before, I said. Her name, Elena. She shoots food like it's the last honest thing on earth. Elena's mouth did that smart thing where it softens in the middle while the edges stay sharp. She kissed me with the proprietary ease of a house cat and nodded. Then respect her, she said. Don't make our bed into a press release. Am I supposed to interrogate you? I asked. She smirked like a woman who'd learned not to blush. If you need to, but you'll waste your evening. There is no honest after hours in a kitchen, only versions of dark that forgive different sins. Elena and I stayed late the night she asked to capture the heat off a steak as its proteins unwound. I cut and she shot, and the empty dining room pressed its ear to our work. Hold that, she said. No, there, where the fat wants to turn into language. The fat always wants to turn into language, I said, and she laughed and stepped into me and kissed me the way you kiss a glass that has your lipstick on it already. Not a question, not a threat, just an understanding that we were better off not pretending. Her hands on my shoulders were work strong. I learned the sound she makes when my mouth finds the place in her neck that collects fear. It's small and defiant. We stopped before we fell out of orbit. She licked a smear of sauce from my knuckle and the world narrowed to the right size. Later, she said, when we aren't borrowing time from the stove. I found a key card in Elena's tote the next morning when I was looking for batteries for the thermometer. It was one of ours. I could tell by the embossed wave. I stayed here after the gala, she said when I asked. It was late, they comped me sometimes. You were still closing inventory. I was, I said, and heard the part of my voice that had learned the register of a maitre d'. Were you alone? She watched me like a woman who enjoyed owning glass. We're not doing interrogations, she said, and then softened. I had a meeting with an investor in the lobby. It bled over. I needed sleep. An investor for what? I asked, even though I knew. Ambition has a smell that doesn't wash out. My own project, she said, bright as the cover of a magazine. A sister concept to Etta. More feminine, smaller plates, more gold and less wood, more me. I thought you'd be proud. I am, I lied because I was also injured and both things were true. You could have used my couch. Right, she said, because we're so good at sleeping there. The pop-up dinner that followed was supposed to be a triumph for everyone involved. Our food, her guest list, money that likes to see itself reflected in copper pans. I prepped my courses until my fingers were useless and delegated until my sous chef knew my nightmares. Elena came to shoot, her quiet, predatory grace at the edge of the room, catching steam like it owed her rent. The investor arrived late in a suit that fit like a smug apology. Matvey, hair you pay for, a watch you could mortgage, the habit of touching Elena in public like he'd invented hands. He sat right at the chef's counter where I could pretend his appetite mattered. He put down the D&D sign on his phone like an inside joke. Elena stood behind him, smelling of the fig that had settled into my jacket weeks ago, and met my eyes the way a tightrope meets a foot. I plaited a beet rose and thought about humiliation like it had a physical shape. I thought about revenge, which is a course that always arrives overcooked. And then I cooked. I let my hands do their job. I salted from high. I found the heat at the center of the pan like a familiar pulse. I taught the asparagus to lie still. I sent out a dish that looked like a red mouth, tuna and hibiscus, and a smear of black garlic that needed a tongue. Elena shot it and looked at me like she'd like to taste what the room couldn't. When the caramel broke just right, when the fish came off the grill in that split second between possible and ruined, I felt honest. Not clean, not innocent, but honest. When service ended and the room exhaled and the glasses made their thin music in the bussing tub, Elena came to the pass and rested her elbows where the heat had thrummed. Her lipstick was diminished in a way that suggests kissing or wine or both. "You were brilliant," she said, and her voice meant it and also meant, "Be careful." "You could have told me the name of the man who wants to buy your mouth," I said. "You could have told me the name of the woman who has your tongue," she answered, not cruel, just correctly. "Her name is Elena," I said, as if a truth spoken cleanly could begin to wash a table. "I told you before." "I told you before too," she said, and that's when we both understood. The treaty had worked as designed and failed at everything else. Rules had kept our bodies safe and our pride organized. They hadn't kept our hearts in line. We split our life with an efficiency that would have impressed our landlords. She took the PR lists, the gold-rimmed plates, the cordless drill I never learned to use correctly. I kept the knives that remember my hand and the coffee grinder that sounds like a small airplane. We left each other a few stupid tokens, her hair tie on my nightstand, my tasting spoon in her tote, like saints trading relics. We did not break. We did, however, open. Elena didn't pour herself into the space Elena left. That would have been a cheap trick, and we weren't magicians. She arrived with her camera and the plant that never quite forgave my apartment and a habit of sleeping like a letter bent into an envelope. We kept our own schedules and met inside them like rooms that share a wall. Sometimes she'd come by before service and sit on the dry storage bins while I prepped, legs swung like a metronome in a better song. Sometimes she'd text me a single word, hungry, and I'd know she didn't mean food or not only food. There was an evening when Etta took a breath and the world gave us a quiet we didn't deserve. I locked the front door, flipped the sign, and turned the music down to the point where bass felt like a palm under the floor. Elena sat on the pass and watched me slice strawberries thin as a rumor. "Teach me a thing," she said, holding up a knife with two fingers like a microphone. "About fruit?" I asked. "About you," she said. I took her hand, slid her index along the blade without touching the edge, the way you show someone the exact place where control lives. "It's not pressure," I said. "It's angle. The knife needs to believe you won't fight it." I let her mirror my movement. The strawberry obediently turned into uniform red moons. The air between us got warmer by a degree I've learned to respect. She pushed the cutting board aside with her hip and put her palm on my chest. We kissed like a pair who know what it costs not to, and in the clean brightness of the kitchen, with the hoods asleep and the knives thinking about tomorrow, her mouth tasted of sugar and something honest. I pressed her back onto the cool stainless and trailed a line of fruit sweet along the inside of her wrist with my tongue. She arched just enough to write a vowel in the air. I will not itemize us. I will say only that we were generous and careful, and that the towel we used to wipe the counter later smelled like strawberries, and the kind of sweat that never has to apologize. We started a supper club on our nights off. Nothing flashy, 10 seats around the prep table, a menu that flowed like gossip, oysters with a lick of yuzu and pepper, lamb with coffee and thyme, a lemon tart that remembered a farm. Elena shot the evening as it happened, faces soft in the low light, plates between them like letters finally opened. We called it supper, nothing italic because that's all it was, food and a room that told the truth. Elena's new place opened with gold and fig and certainty. I sent flowers that smelled like basil and rain, signed only with a small salt cellar because I don't know how to be petty when someone is making a thing. She replied with a photo of a full dining room. "We did it anyway," she wrote. I wrote back, "You always would." It didn't feel like surrender. It felt like a kind of appetite learning to mind its manners. If you walk by Etta late, you might see me in the window polishing a glass the way a man might polish a thought, slow and useless and necessary. I turn off the lights in the order the room prefers. Pendants first so the tables can exhale, then the pass so the burners feel less alone, then the candle near the door because that's how you tell a space you respect it. Sometimes Elena's silhouette appears in the glass behind me, camera slung low, mouth tilted the way it does when she's about to ask for something that will make tomorrow's prep list more complicated. Sometimes she just touches the back of my neck with 2 fingers, the exact pressure that tells a man he is finally where his hands can stop lying. I am not a better person than when I started. I'm a more accurate one. I can still slice myself on pride as quickly as on a mandolin. I still want to be forgiven in the extravagant way I forgive nobody. But in the heat above the burners, in the hiss that means the pan understands me, in the kiss I receive with my mouth tasting of time, I've learned the only trick I trust. I show up in my own kitchen and remain on the line when the ticket rail gets heavy. I plate what's honest. I salt what needs it, and I let satin stay where it belongs, beneath the alibi, never the point of it.